I'm Professor Donna and I'm the head of the Race, Class and Ethnicity Research Network at the University of Sunderland. And last year we were commissioned by the Sunderland Samba Football Club to undertake some research to try to understand the experiences of the club members with the club itself. So in July last year, we conducted an online survey with the members of Sunderland Samba Football Club in Sunderland and also in Kenya, recognizing that the Sunderland team are men and the Kenya team are women. But the survey actually that was conducted with everybody who was a member of the club, regardless of whether they were players, because some people were players, some people were volunteers. So we got the opinions of everybody that had an involvement with the club, whether as players or as volunteers. So the survey that we did actually had four sections to it. The first section, we tried to understand what the profile of the team members were. The second section was around what motivated them to join the club. The third section was about what were their experiences with the club. And the fourth section was trying to understand what their ambitions were, what their aspirations were for the club in the future. So we did the survey with, as I said, both the Sunderland members and the Kenya members. And some of the results of the survey were different depending on which team members they were. Recognizing, as I said before, that there's a different context in Kenya, there are slightly different objectives for the club in Kenya as it is in Sunderland. So recognizing that, some of the questions or some of the findings were slightly different between Sunderland and Kenya. But what I can say is that from the findings, what was overwhelming was that all the members of the club really felt a sense of community with the club. And in Kenya, the team in Kenya actually used the word, they felt like they were part of a family. You know, they felt so much a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and a sense of sharing with the team in Kenya. That also came out with the team in Sunderland as well. But for the Sunderland team, one of the things that they felt was really connecting them with the club was the fact of just the joy of playing football. They were really interested in playing football for the club. And that was so for Kenya, but more so for Kenya was a sense of community. So, you know, those are some of the findings. Most of the respondents, most of the participants were really happy and satisfied with their experiences with the club. And they were both had some big aspirations for the club. The aspirations for the club, with the team in Sunderland, they had higher aspirations for the club than the team in Kenya. So I think overwhelmingly the response from all of the members of the club, whether in Sunderland or in Kenya, was that they really felt that the club had enhanced their lives. And that was a finding that was across both teams. Now, in terms of our recommendations, we came up with 6 recommendations that emerged from the findings that we got from the survey. So the first recommendation that we came up with was about perhaps what the club needs to do is to try to raise some more funds to increase or to enhance the competitiveness of the club, the professionalism of the club, because that really came out powerfully in the Sunderland team, that they really aspired for the club to move up the leagues. They wanted to have more competitive matches. They wanted to become much more professional footballers. So our first recommendation was around that. How can the club raise some funds so that they can enhance the coaching, enhance the professionalization of the club? That also came out with the Kenyan team, but they weren't so the percentages weren't as high in terms of the need for the professionalism of the club. What they were more interested in Kenya was bringing the team together as a community. They wanted to reach out more to the community and to enhance that sense of togetherness. So our first recommendation, as I said, is around that professionalism of the club and more competitive matches. The second recommendation has to do with the Kenya team, and one of the objectives for the Kenya team is to improve education around social issues such as HIV/AIDS as well as female genital mutilation. And one of the things that came out from the Kenya findings were that the team didn't really feel that their education around those issues had been improved as a result of participating in the team. So one of our second recommendations was around enhancing that educational aspect around those social issues. It can be HIV/AIDS, it can be FGM, but also think about other social issues that might be affecting the team and enhance education around that. Another recommendation that we made was also for the Kenya team, where one of the objectives for the Kenya team is to do some more education around finance and around how to start own business. Because from our survey we recognized that many of the Kenya team were either not employed or they were not employed compared to the Sunderland team. So one of the objectives of the Kenya team is to raise awareness around finances and how to start your own business and so on. But what we found for the Kenya team was that they didn't feel that they had actually they weren't really motivated by that to join the team, and they didn't feel that had necessarily been enhanced by being a member of the team. So for the Kenya team, our third recommendation was around enhancing the education around financing and how to start a small business, because that would really help to support the members of the Kenya team. And our fourth recommendation is really for the Sunderland team, because although, as I said before, most of the Sunderland participants felt that they were safe in the club and so on. There were 35% of them who felt that they had experienced racism, not in the club, but in the wider Sunderland community. So there are still elements of racism in the wider Sunderland community that were expressed by 35% of the Sunderland team. So that means our fourth recommendation was around joining with other anti-racist community groups in the community to help to tackle racism within the Sunderland community. Our fifth recommendation is more relevant to the Kenya team, because what they felt that they wanted to have was more interaction with the Sunderland team. So they wanted to have more visits to the UK so that they could have some kind of interaction with the Sunderland team. That also goes back to fundraising. So more funds are needed, where more members from Kenya can actually come over to interact with the Sunderland team, because that was expressed in a survey as something that they really wanted to see happen. So that was our fifth recommendation, to have more interaction between the Kenya team and the Sunderland team. And then our final recommendation, because the survey responses from Kenya was very low, and what we found was that the levels of satisfaction that we found for the Kenya team were a little bit lower than for the Sunderland team, although the levels of satisfaction were quite high for both teams. For Sunderland team, it was over 90% satisfaction in the club. For the Kenya team, it was over 80% satisfaction. So it was slightly lower. So what we recommended as our sixth recommendation was to do more research, particularly with the Kenya team, maybe doing some interviews with the women there to try to unpack what really is the issue there in terms of that slightly lower level of satisfaction. So those are our 6 recommendations, which we hope that will be of value to the Sunderland Samba Club as they move forward to develop what is really a fantastic club that brings people together in both Kenya and in Sunderland.